Nice, beautiful afternoon here in North Carolina, end of summer. So, I've been hearing and seeing some slightly disturbing things, and just wanted to kind of put my 2 cents, my angle in there, because I've seen a lot. So in life, many times, more than one thing is true. Obviously, the biggest news of the year just happened a few days ago. Charlie Kirk being assassinated. And I did not agree with him on everything, but he was a fellow Christian. That seems pretty obvious. I think it's pretty safe to say that he really was a Christian. And you have to respect the movement that he built and the power he was able to accumulate. He was a big reason that Trump got elected. He provided a lot of young votes on the right side. If you've seen any of my videos, you would know that I am a conservative with compassionate and Christian being at least equally as important. Obviously, there's a difference between running a government and values and policies and all that kind of stuff. I can see all of the different angles to all of the different things, and I get that. Basically, I get that the way that Charlie Kirk came off to people on the left was incredibly hostile and closed-minded and, hypocritical of the things that he said he was, including Christian. I see it, in the complicated gray area in the middle, like most things, where you have to be aware of the fact that the organization that he was the head of, he was a co-founder of Turning Points USA, and he got a lot of money to do it with. It's not like he started in his basement making YouTube videos. Going on to college campuses, I think it was partly about free speech and debate. It was also about viral moments and, changing as many minds as possible. There are parts of the conservative ethos that can be quite intolerant. It's where you find a lot of the, the racism and closed-minded nature about, gay rights and trans stuff and all that. I find for the most part that those things don't really cause me a whole lot of issues. So I don't have, I try to treat everybody equally, and I try to love everybody as my neighbor, as I was already kind of like that by my nature. And then becoming a Christian, it's kind of it's easier for me because I've kind of always been that way. I didn't have some of the doctrine of being a Christian, but I've always been very, treat people the way you would want people to treat you, pretty much. And I've never really had any categories that I couldn't do that with. There were certain things, when I was growing up in the 90s, being gay was not a thing that people were just open about. So as I learned about what gay was, and heard people say, you're gay and stuff like that, I started realizing that while I didn't mean harm with my views, that my ignorance could have caused harm. And so I tried to learn enough to not be ignorant and hurt people's feelings from a place of ignorance. There's a lot going on in the world, and I'm not intending to spend a whole lot of time breaking down Charlie Kirk's views and values and compare them to mine exactly. But basically, I see enough of myself in him that it's a pretty shocking thing. I can step back from the personal level and look at it from the point of view of our country and politics and stuff like that, and see how dangerous it is, because it basically could be the Archduke Ferdinand thing of our time. And all that has to happen next is a few people on the left get killed or somebody else on the right, and then we will have a civil war on our hands. I personally believe that Charlie Kirk's recent coming out of the closet, kind of, to admit that Israel is doing some messed up stuff, and that it's not in America's interest at the very least. And I personally think that's why he was killed. Bibi Netanyahu has no shame, and to watch him in these videos talk about what a lover of Israel Charlie Kirk was is so self-serving that it's just, it's crazy. I don't take it personally. I don't take it, and I mean him being assassinated, I don't take it personally. I don't take it as an attack on my way of life or anything like that. Some people do, and I don't think that they're wrong. It kind of does actually matter why he was killed. If he was killed by a crazy leftist, then that's one thing. If he was killed because of Israel or by somebody on the right or for a personal thing or to start a war or whatever the other reason could have been, then we really have to, it was more than likely just a powerful, really brazen, arrogant, not even country, but kind of part of a government of a country deciding to, if he had come out full bore against Israel, it would have really hurt them badly at a time where they are already declining in terms of Americans' will to just continue to support our, crazy relationship with them, where we just do whatever. And, I'm not really going to go into the whole thing, but I do think that he was not killed by somebody on the left to, punish Christians and I will admit that it is possible, and it will be possible even after we get the whole cover story, that the whole cover story is a lie, and that kid they have arrested right now might be a patsy. It's like, it's JFK, or at least it looks like it might be. Charlie Kirk had come out on, about the Epstein stuff. He was not just, he was saying that he thought there was a pretty good chance that Epstein was connected to Mossad. And, those type of views, in my opinion, is probably why he was killed. There is a lot going on. The thing I wanted to see the most was Trump and other people on the right come out and say, no matter why this happened, let's try to not let it get worse. Let nobody else kill anybody. Let's work together, something like that. And instead, he basically came out and said, this was the crazy leftists, and he, if anything, he antagonized the situation. and I was really hoping that he wouldn't do that. My issues with Trump, I basically, I agree with some of the policies. I think the tariffs were a bad idea. I think immigration should be criminals, not just anybody who is here illegally, I think, but definitely not just, going to Home Depot and stuff. I mean, I don't think that's what anybody wanted. But in general, the having Christian values, which whether he's Christian or not, he claims to support Christians. So that is a thing. But conservative policies like libertarian type values, and I'm definitely against abortion. I think there would be a pretty easy way to have abortion turn into a thing that's only done when there's medical need. I think it is the responsibility of the government, and especially people like me, Christians that think abortion shouldn't happen, to put a priority on the kind of care that comes after the baby is born, whether it's getting them adopted or, having less babies that are not wanted, whatever. There's lots of research and stuff. That should be a priority if not having abortions are a priority. You can't just say, we're going to take this thing out, and so people that need to not have babies are going to have them, but we're not going to add anything to the system for how people are cared for. I'm a conservative, but I think that the government does have a responsibility to provide social safety nets and get involved when companies price gouge and things like that. I have an economics degree, and I understand economics a pretty decent amount, and the oligarchy type running things is bad. Like all the tech bros being so close to Trump, that is bad. The way that he has kind of leverage, and they kind of have to do, the stuff that's been happening with law firms, how, the law firms that have pledged all of that work, and there have been a lot of things that Trump has done that I think are against the Constitution and liberty. I don't think that means that there are no conservative values at all in the administration. I know that in times like this, it's definitely the safest and the best thing to do to love your neighbor. And a lot of the problem today with Christianity is people that say Christian things and then don't live Christian lives. And there's a ton of stuff, behind that. And that's obviously a very broad generalization. But the real Christians among us, we want the United States to be good because we love our country, but we also understand the values of mercy and grace and forgiveness and patience and tolerance and all that type of stuff. The hard part is when there are people that, you hear a lot of things. You hear a lot of things about, how the left is attacking the right. And at least right now, it looks like that is not at all what happened. This kid is a kid in a conservative household. I saw something that said that their family didn't even know any Democrats. So I think it's pretty hard to call him a leftist. Likely he's a patsy and there's another shooter, or he was somehow mixed up in something that, it's likely not. He just had a wild hair to go out and shoot Charlie Kirk. I mean, it's possible, and we'll see. But it seems like a lot of mercy and grace should be the colors of the day. And I don't know. It's a difficult situation when you want to have mercy and grace, but at the same time, your people are under attack. The Bible doesn't teach you to let someone, be an aggressor to you, and you're supposed to take it. Loving your neighbor is a personal, it's for each person to do. The United States is not supposed to love its neighbor. On the world stage, our country has to operate by the same, rules and customs that everybody else does. And on the world stage, we are, like every other country, having to kind of fight for resources and stuff. I'm gonna have to switch locations because of this mower. I'm not really sure where they're going, so we'll see how this works out. I hope you can hear me at least some. So, I feel like to cover or talk about this situation responsibly is to admit that we don't know a lot, and also to try to, this is the kind of thing, it's a tragedy, it is also a crime, and basically the best thing to do is to try to heal and forgive and understand, and not to exact vengeance, at least before anybody knows what it is that happened. I am still a baby Christian, and to no degree do I speak for Christianity or claim to even know a whole lot about Christianity. I'm reading the book, I'm in the Word frequently, and I'm trying to become more acquainted with God, and the Bible being the Word of God is the main way to do that. I know that for me, a lot of the difficulty is because I hear things from people on the left. I know people with more left-leaning progressive viewpoints. You saw some of them celebrating. I thought that was obviously in poor taste. I mean, and disrespectful and everything else. What I try to do is I try to understand. And I could just hate them and just be mad at them and think they suck. That would be pretty easy to do. Or I can think that, and then instead of worrying about that part, just try to understand. And what you understand is he was definitely on the right. I mean, he was a power broker. He was one of the most influential people in the country as far as conservatism. Probably Trump wouldn't have gotten elected without him. So, like, he wasn't just some conservative. He had, he was lobbied by people. I'm sure people donated, gave money, tried to get him to, support causes, all kinds of stuff. So there are always going to be things that have, I saw on the PBD podcast, they asked ChatGPT how many hours of footage there were of Charlie Kirk, and it was like 4,700 or something like that. In that many hours, you're going to be able to find something of somebody that you can dislike, I mean, easily, of anybody. And he was one of the people that I would watch when I needed to make sure that, I watch a lot of the stuff I watch in terms of news coverage is center right and center left. And then for the slightly more extreme right and left, there's things like the Young Turks on the left, Brian Tyler Cohen, the Pod Save America, that stuff. And they're not real far to the left, but if you don't have left-leaning viewpoints, they're not the ones you're going to watch, probably. And then, on the right, there are really a lot more options, but I watch like Flagrant, and that's Andrew Schulz, and then Ben Shapiro and Tucker Carlson and Charlie Kirk, and there's like 6 or 7. But I watch Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens, and these, they're kind of centering, moving more to the center on the right. But they used to be much more right. It seems like there's a basic disagreement on facts because of the extreme nature of what a lot of people watch, a lot of podcasts. And it takes a good amount of work to actually get the nonpartisan truth about something. Before I ever develop emotions about something, I get both sides, at least. I am a Christian and a conservative. And to me, the Christian part kind of mitigates the conservative part. The conservative really, it really is more of the elite, policy-wise. I mean, they believe in not having much of a social net, for poor, not a whole lot of social programs, low taxes, and all these things make sense if you're born into existence with resources. If you're born with, and I don't mean wealthy, I just mean not poor, like with some wealth. And wealth to me is money past monthly expenses and emergency fund. So, you can have a little wealth and not be wealthy. Wealth is that thing, it's like the put back. It's like the in reserve. If you have a savings account with $70,000 in it and your monthly bills are like $5,000, then you have some wealth. You could not work for a year and still pay all your bills. Most people aren't in that situation. Most people, they miss a week of work, can feel it. And missing a week of work could be enough to have major consequences financially. So conservative policies really are, I'm not saying purely or completely or anything like that, but really are for more of the upper middle class than the poor working class. Democratic policies are, higher taxes, especially on people with money, and social welfare safety net type of things like food stamps and Medicaid and that kind of thing. And it makes sense because they are trying to craft policies for the working poor. That is a big portion of our country. And the reason that we have such a, like, the reason the situation is crazy is because there are a lot of people who, if they voted purely on economic self-interest, would vote to the left, but because of the culture wars and the moral majority and Jerry Falwell in the 70s that came along and picked abortion and gay marriage and basically decided to try to build a coalition around conservative family values type idea. And since there are a lot of people, typically in the South where I live, that are socioeconomically on the lower end, but are also have strong Christian family values, they kind of siphon those people off to the right. And that would be okay if the politicians on the right were Christians who lived and voted for Christian values and policies. And then there's the more extreme, kind of nationalist view. People call it the Christian nationalist, white nationalist, whatever, where, like you want to get all the immigrants out because when it's Christian, white nationalist, whatever you want to call it, there are more white people in our country than anything else. I think we're like 70% is white. So, the same thing's going to be true of Christianity. Most Christians are white. And it's easy to see self-protection of a group. In this case, you can talk about race as racist or, misogynist or, those type of negative category type words. And it's difficult to, a lot of people I know think that you can't, that basically Christianity and the right go together. And I know where it comes from. It comes from the left putting equality above everything else. And when you try to have a government based on equality, that means everybody gets treated the same. That means that people who have more are now being taken from to give to the people that have less. And it's hard to be like, well, 200 years ago, the whole slavery thing. So, how does that mean that my family has to pay an extra $10,000 in taxes to have food stamps or whatever for somebody who just sits at home and doesn't work? And there's a lot of stereotypes and ignorance that goes into most of that. But the way I make sense of all the craziness is with Christian values. I try to love each of those people like my neighbor. So the Democrat who thinks that they're just trying to help the poor and, and they have good intentions or whatever, as well as the conservative who's trying to help their people and have good intentions. You treat all of them the same. Even when somebody has bad intentions, you're supposed to love them as your neighbor. That is a lot harder to do. And, it's hard, especially when you grow up a certain way, being told a certain thing, everybody around you is a certain way. It's hard to just start having completely inverse thoughts and thinking that your people have something wrong or whatever. It's Because what I'm saying is, it's usually, in my opinion, well-intentioned, decent people who just don't have awareness of a certain, detail or group of details, knowledge of a thing. So all of that goes into this whole Charlie Kirk thing. And, it obviously is wrong and terrible and a tragedy and a bunch of other bad things that he was just assassinated. It was bad for the country. It was bad for whoever did it. It was like a big loss for him, his family, his people, the right, the administration, like everything. If it really was Israel, then they probably will at least mostly accomplish what they wanted, which would be to shut him up and have him not come out completely against Israel. I worry about saying some of these things because I don't want anybody to feel like I'm judging them. I'm trying to judge the situation from a 1,000-foot view. I'm trying to zoom out some and understand why. And it would be great if I could come up with a thing to do, but that's the hard part, because you're talking about like ways of life and community and a lot of things that is hard to change. And which ones should be changed. There's not like a answer. I do know the answer. If everybody can love their neighbor, and you don't have to be a Christian to love your neighbor, if everybody, what we need to do is all realize that we are all Americans, and no matter what happens, like a large scale, like a Civil War type idea would be really bad for everybody. I mean, it really would. It would be bad for everybody. The richest people, it would be the least bad for. The more money, the easier you can avoid anything like that. And I'm sure they all have plans and bunkers and helicopters and ships and all kinds of stuff to wait it out while we all kill each other. That may have been the purpose of this thing, or a dual purpose, because it's pretty, you can't imagine a scenario where somebody like that gets assassinated like that and there isn't some big reaction. I know that Charlie Kirk was saying there's no way October 7th was not known about by the Israelis. That's what I said the day it happened. I said there's no way that they did that with just normal stuff going on the Israeli side. Things had to have been shut down, cameras and automated machine guns and all kinds of stuff. There's no way that they just did that, they being Hamas, that they just did that all on their own. Plus, there's reports about intelligence that Israel did know. Point is, Charlie Kirk had come out and said that Israel had to know about it at least.
There were protests planned this week against Netanyahu, where they anticipated tens of thousands of people to take to the streets. That's all gone, Patrick. Netanyahu now has an emergency government and a mandate to lead. I'm not willing to go so far that saying that Netanyahu knew or there was intelligence here, but I think some questions need to be asked. Was there a stand down order? Was there a stand down order? 6 hours? I don't believe it. Israel's the size of New Jersey. When I took a helicopter ride from Jerusalem to the Gaza border, it's 45 minutes. Wow. 6 hours. They're live streaming the killing of Jews. Did somebody in the government say stand down? That is a legitimate, non-conspiracy question. The whole country is the IDF. The whole country is. Yeah. And you're trying to tell me that they're going to concerts and kibbutzes and schools?
There's no way they didn't. To have them just running around to different places killing people in the most heavily guarded place in the world, just about. So, in that position, getting rid of him and starting a war inside our country, I heard somebody say that the left of our country and and Muslims are Israel's enemy. Those are Israel's biggest two enemies. And this would kind of cover both of those. There's not an easy answer about exactly what to do or exactly what to think it is that's happening. But I hope that some people with money interests get involved to prevent large-scale violence or anything like that, which isn't like, I wouldn't say it's likely, but it's certainly a circumstance, one of the few circumstances where that kind of thing seems plausible. But if we can all remember that we are Americans and that we all, like Kennedy said, we all breathe the same air, we all cherish our children's futures, and we are all mortal. It's a great speech. The Pax Americana speech. And
not
yeah, I
merely
don't
peace
remember.
in our time, but peace in all time. I speak of peace because of the new face of war. For in the final analysis, our most basic common link is that we all inhabit this small planet. We all breathe the same air. We all cherish our children's futures. And we are all mortal.
I feel like he's following me. I went down there, came up here. I guess it's just timing. You know, I was going to do a video about shame and surrender. And I have some good ideas. And they will be, I almost want to do it right now. So, to conclude, I hope everybody can not rush to judgment and be as tolerant and patient as possible. I hope that the authorities will do their job and find out who did it, why, and punish them. I don't know how that's going to go. I'm trying not to just give an update, but my perspective, which is a Christian perspective, but also a, analyst perspective. I call the channel Wholly Overthought because things are wholly overthought, everything I do, and also holy. I really like the name. If you're a Christian and you're angry because you feel attacked, wait and see if that's even what happened. But even if it is, if you are a Christian, you have been instructed by Jesus to be loving. That is definitely Christ's number one thing, is love others and serve others, really. I mean, it goes even farther than just loving others. But, and I'm not a Bible, nerd as much as my wife. I can't just pull out, quotes from the Bible to back up what I'm saying, but I could ask her or look them up or whatever. But I don't think they're necessary, because pretty much everybody, especially if you're a Christian, you do know that is the number one thing, is to be loving of your neighbor as you are of yourself. And it's hard to know and see people that are taking this that way, kind of. And like, I'm not saying that that's wrong. I'm not saying that that's weak. What I'm saying is that it highlights like the issue in politics in our country. And I really hope that in a couple of months there won't have been a retaliation or further, political violence, and maybe we will have made a little bit of progress. It's difficult. I'm not. I have a atypical upbringing and life story. I mean, I've dealt with going to jail and prison. I've got an economics degree. That bad trip that unlocked all math was crazy. And then the drugs and the recovery. I have a very a perspective from the very bottom. So it's kind of easy for me to see everything in my life as a blessing, and therefore not really take personally things like this, but instead see it as either a state or some kind of faceless entity gone awry, run amok, whatever, or something more sinister. But both are forms of evil that we already knew existed. It's not like we found out a new thing. Somebody on our side was killed, and that's not good, fun, fair, any of those things. But these are the kind of times that demand an overbearance of principles that are on the patient, on the submissive, the person being oppressed. It's on. You have to come at it from that kind of place, which is hard for people to do without, perpetually feeling like a victim. So it's, it's kind of, part of it is pride, and pride can be good, but pride is a lot of times not good. I don't know. I hope everybody will show patience and restraint and tolerance. And I hope that the facts bear out that this wasn't ideologically the worst case scenario. Sorry this ran a little long. If you're, enjoying watching my videos or this video, then when they run long, I guess that's a good thing. But I'm gonna drop it here, and I very much, more than I can put into words, appreciate it. If you are seeing this part right here, then you're like my favorite person in the world. And I truly don't think anybody will ever see this part of this video, because I only get, last video got like 82 views, which is a lot more than 5, but it's still not very many. And I don't think anybody watched it all the way through. So I'm still trying to get better and figure out exactly what I should be and how I should be doing these. Or say what and how I should be doing these. Anyway, God bless and have a great day. And until next time, this side or the other.